Teen, hero saves CEO's pregnant wife. Mid-flight, what he asked for and everyone in tears. A teenage boy on a flight with no doctor. A pregnant woman gasping for air. No one moves until Jordan Ellis, a 17-year-old from Atlanta, stands up and changes everything. What starts as a medical emergency at 36,000 feet turns into a national movement that redefines healthcare, compassion, and legacy. This isn't just a story about saving lives, it's about building something bigger than yourself. You won't believe how far one voice can go. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire, heal, and awaken the heart. At 36,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the cabin of Flight AZ-1476 shimmered under the soft hush of dimmed lights and ambient engine hum. Most passengers had slipped into that strange in-between place of airplane slumber, half-dreams stitched together by turbulence and fatigue. Businessmen snored with loosened ties, earbuds pulsed with lo-fi beats, children clutched plush animals under worn blankets. All was still. Except in Seat 1A. Claire Hawthorne stirred in her seat, a gentle frown tugging at the corners of her mouth. Her hand clutched her rounded belly, now 30 weeks along, and her other palm moved instinctively to her chest. Her breath came quicker than usual, short, tight. She tried to adjust in the plush recliner, brushing away the scratchy feeling building behind her sternum. But then something shifted. Sharp, sudden. Her eyes widened. "Nicholas," she whispered, her voice so soft it barely cut through the drone of the cabin. "Nick, I can't breathe." Nicholas Hawthorne, CEO of Halcyon Biogenetics, keynote speaker in Geneva, and husband of the woman next to him, snapped awake. It took less than a second to read the panic in her face. His champagne flute clinked to the floor as he lunged sideways. "Claire! What's wrong? What's—" She clutched at his wrist. Her skin felt clammy. Her lips, already pale, were taking on a bluish hue. Nicholas shot a look around the cabin, his voice rising. "Hey! We need help here. I think she can't. Someone get help." The nearest flight attendant, a woman in her mid-30s named Sabrina, rushed down the aisle from the galley. Her practiced calm was already cracking around the edges as she saw Claire slumped and gasping. "Is there a doctor on board?" she called out sharply, pressing the intercom button. "Medical emergency in first class. Passenger experiencing difficulty breathing. Pregnant, requesting immediate medical assistance." The captain's voice didn't respond right away. Sabrina knelt beside Claire, unclipping the orange emergency kit from under the cabinet. Claire tried to speak but couldn't form words now, only broken, shallow breaths. In the rear of the aircraft, Seat 37D, a teenage boy sat bolt upright. His name was Jordan Ellis, 17, African American. Gray hoodie, slightly frayed backpack tucked under the seat in front of him. Headphones still resting around his neck, now silent. He had been asleep, sort of, lost in a half-listen to the lecture series he'd downloaded weeks ago in preparation for the Zurich interview that could change his life. But that voice, difficulty breathing, pregnant, emergency, jerked his mind fully awake. His chest tightened. He recognized that tone, not just the urgency, but the clinical cues: hypoxia, tachypnea, cyanosis. And somewhere between his ribs, a memory echoed like a fire alarm. His father on the kitchen floor in Atlanta, clutching his chest, gasping like a fish out of water, lips turning the color of plum skin. No ambulance came in time then, but Jordan had since learned every article, every term, every possible sign of a pulmonary embolism because of it, and what he'd just overheard, it matched. His eyes swept the cabin. No one else was moving. He pressed the call button. A different attendant, older, with an impatient expression, approached. "Ma'am," Jordan said, "I think I know what's happening with the woman up front. If she's pregnant and short of breath, we're asking for a licensed physician." she said coolly, cutting him off. "Please stay seated." "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he continued, his voice tight. "But pulmonary embolism risk increases with pregnancy. I think she might have a clot. My dad died from one. I know the symptoms. If you give her aspirin and oxygen—" She turned to walk away. "Please remain seated." Jordan's fingers curled into a fist. He felt his ears flush hot, not from rejection but from frustration that came wrapped in the familiar tone of dismissal. He knew what he looked like: hoodie, worn jeans, too young, too poor, too black. But he also knew what a clot looked like, and if no one else was standing up, he did. The action alone caused 2 passengers in his row to glance up, startled. Jordan called louder this time, voice sharp and urgent. "Ma'am, pregnancy raises embolism risk 5 times. Has she had leg swelling? Shortness of breath between words?" The words struck. The same attendant stopped. She blinked at him. Did you say leg swelling?" "Yes," Jordan said. "That's where it starts. Usually in the calf. Look, if I'm wrong, fine, but if I'm right, she could die before we land." For a moment, everything held still. Then the intercom crackled again. "Cabin crew, report to first class immediately." That was enough. The flight attendant looked him over, hesitant. "Come with me," she said. "But if you're wrong—" "I pray I'm not," Jordan replied. He walked past the tight rows of reclined passengers, many now wide awake, whispering and watching him with suspicion. Some narrowed their eyes. Others frowned. A few leaned to whisper behind their hands. Who was this kid? What gave him the right to walk into first class like he belonged? Jordan didn't look back. He focused on the sound of Claire's breathing. It was erratic now, almost gasping. When he reached her seat, Sabrina looked up, surprised to see him. "Who's this?" Nicholas demanded. "Where's the doctor?" "There isn't one," Sabrina said quickly. "This young man says he may know what's happening." Nicholas's eyes locked on Jordan, and what he saw was not hope. He saw a teenager, a stranger, a risk. "This is my wife," he said coldly, voice cracking. "She's carrying our daughter. I don't want guesses." Jordan nodded once. Calm. Clear. "I understand, sir. But her symptoms match pulmonary embolism. That's a clot in the lung. Aspirin could help thin the blood. Oxygen buys her time. I've seen it. I took care of my father when he had one." Claire suddenly spoke, hoarse. "My left leg was swollen yesterday. I thought it was normal." Jordan leaned forward slightly. "That's likely where it began." Nicholas froze. His breath stalled, not from lack of air, but from fear. Claire's lips were blue. Her chest heaved. Her eyes flicked to his. Terrified, pleading, trying not to cry. No doctor was coming. No guarantee existed. Just this boy, and a choice. Nicholas looked at Claire's hand in his, then at Jordan's steady face. "Do what he says," Nicholas whispered. The flight crew moved fast. Sabrina handed Jordan the aspirin. He instructed her gently to have Claire chew it, not swallow. "It works faster that way," he said. Nicholas slipped off Claire's shoes. Sabrina elevated her legs with rolled-up blankets. Jordan adjusted the oxygen mask, ensuring a better seal. He spoke softly to Claire. "In through your nose, out slow. You're okay, I promise. Just hang on." The cabin around them was silent now. No more whispers, just watching. The boy in a hoodie had taken control. Someone behind them muttered, "They're really letting a kid do this?" But no one interfered. Nicholas heard it. He glanced around and then back at Jordan. "How do you know this stuff?" he asked, not out of hostility, but awe. Jordan didn't pause. "Because my dad had a clot like this, and because we couldn't afford doctors, so I learned what I had to. Where I'm from, knowledge is the only thing that saves us." Nicholas didn't reply. He had no words, but he nodded. Sabrina's voice crackled over the intercom again. "We're diverting to Lisbon. Medical team will be waiting on the ground." Claire's color began to return, faint pink along her cheeks. Her chest still rose quickly, but not as frantically. Jordan stayed at her side, whispered, coached, held her gaze. Nicholas looked at him again, truly saw him. Not a kid in a hoodie, not a risk, but the person saving his family. And, for the first time, Nicholas realized status meant nothing at 36,000 feet. Not the leather seat, not the last name, not the money, just breath, and the person who kept it going. Claire's breaths came in shallow rasps, each one fighting for space inside her tightening chest. The overhead lights flickered faintly as the plane coasted forward through cloud-swept skies, but for everyone gathered in that narrow corner of first class, time had shrunk down to the staccato rhythm of her gasps. Jordan Ellis leaned in, carefully checking the flow of the oxygen mask, then turned to Sabrina. Her hands feel cold. Do you have a pulse oximeter in that kit? Sabrina rummaged through the orange case, hands trembling slightly, then handed Jordan the small device. He clipped it gently onto Claire's finger. The reading blinked. 82%. Low. Concerning. Not fatal, not yet. But if that number dropped even a few more points... Jordan exhaled slowly. He didn't let his anxiety show. He'd learned long ago that panic didn't help anyone, least of all the person who couldn't breathe. Nicholas hovered close, hovering over Claire as if sheer presence could anchor her to life. His normally composed features were distorted now, creased with terror, the skin around his eyes pale and tight. His hand rested on Claire's swollen belly, as if reminding himself they were still both here. "She's going to be okay, right?" Nicholas asked. It was barely a question, more like a plea. "She's stable, for now," Jordan replied, adjusting the oxygen flow slightly. "But it's not a permanent fix. The aspirin will thin her blood a little, help keep the clot from growing, but she needs hospital care ASAP." Nicholas's jaw clenched. "We're, 40,000 feet in the air?" 36, Jordan corrected, then softened his voice. "But we're already diverting. That was the right call." Behind them, a curtain swished as Sabrina returned with another attendant. "Captain says we'll reach Lisbon in just under 30 minutes, she reported. "There's a medical team on standby." Jordan nodded, but didn't take his eyes off Claire. "She needs to stay calm. Any panic will make it harder to breathe." Claire's lips parted. I'm okay," she whispered. "Just stay." "You're doing great," Jordan said, his tone gentle. "You're strong, and help is close." Claire gave a tiny nod. It was all she could manage. Nicholas stood rigidly, one hand in his hair, the other still gripping Claire's. "Why didn't I see this? She said her legs were sore last night. I thought it was just swelling." "It's easy to miss," Jordan said. "Even doctors miss it sometimes. But you're here now. You called for help. That matters." Nicholas looked at him sharply. "But you saw it. You heard 3 symptoms and just knew?" Jordan hesitated. "I had to learn. After my dad died, we waited hours in the ER before anyone even checked him. They kept calling it anxiety until he stopped breathing." Nicholas flinched. "I'm sorry." Jordan didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. The memory still sat in his throat like ash, but he kept moving, checking Claire's pulse, adjusting the blankets beneath her feet, keeping her elevated. She had color again, faint but returning. The aspirin had started doing its job. The rest of first class remained eerily quiet. A woman across the aisle kept glancing over, her lips tight with disapproval. A man in a suit muttered something into his phone, clearly annoyed by the commotion. No one else had stepped forward to help. No one had offered anything but judgment from behind their recliners. Sabrina noticed it too. She leaned closer to Jordan and said softly, "You know, you're doing more than some trained professionals would have done." Jordan gave a half smile. "I'm just doing what someone should." A loud ding interrupted the moment as the captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Lisbon for a medical emergency. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Claire squeezed Nicholas's hand weakly. Almost there, she murmured. Jordan pressed the oximeter again. 86%. Rising, slowly. The oxygen was helping. He glanced at the clock on his watch. 19 minutes to landing. He could make that count. "Can I ask something?" Nicholas said suddenly. Jordan looked up. "Were you flying to Zurich? For a school thing?" Jordan paused. "Yeah." "Interview?" Jordan nodded. "Medical scholarship. Young global health scholars." Nicholas looked stunned. "They only take 50 students worldwide." "I know," Jordan said. "It was today. In person only." Nicholas blinked. "But you stayed. You knew you'd miss it." Jordan nodded again, quiet but unwavering. "You don't walk away from someone who can't breathe." Nicholas opened his mouth, then shut it. "What do you say to that? What words exist when someone just sacrificed everything for your family?" The cabin jolted slightly as the plane hit turbulence. Claire flinched. "It's okay," Jordan said gently. "Just a little bump. We're almost there." Sabrina returned with a wet cloth, dabbing Claire's forehead. "ETA, 15 minutes." As they descended, the pressure in the cabin shifted. Jordan noted the change and leaned forward, whispering to Claire, "Keep breathing slow. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're safe." Outside the window, the faint glow of the Portuguese coast appeared, tiny lights dotting the horizon. The hum of conversation had returned to the cabin, but everyone still kept stealing glances toward the front. They weren't seeing a first-class couple anymore. They weren't seeing a teenage boy from economy. They were watching something else. A moment where status, assumptions, and entitlement had cracked, and something human, something bigger, had slipped through. The tires screeched as the plane touched down, the force jerking everyone slightly forward. Jordan's eyes flicked to Claire. She tensed, but didn't cry out. The pressure hadn't worsened. She was holding on. The aircraft taxied to a far side of the tarmac, where 2 ambulances and a team of paramedics were already waiting. The main cabin door opened before protocol. The sudden blast of warm air rushed in. "Let's move," Sabrina called. The paramedics climbed aboard with a stretcher and portable oxygen tanks. Jordan stepped back as the team took over. But before they wheeled Claire out, she caught Jordan's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. He gave her a quiet nod, his throat too tight to speak. Nicholas followed her out, never letting go of her hand. But as he turned at the door, he paused and looked back at Jordan. Their eyes met. Jordan thought he'd walk away. Instead, Nicholas gave the smallest of nods. Gratitude, recognition, something else, unspoken. Then he was gone. The door shut behind them. Jordan sank into the seat across the aisle. His knees trembled now that the crisis had passed. Sabrina placed a bottle of water in front of him and sat down across from him. "You okay?" He nodded, blinking hard. "Yeah, just—" She smiled. "You saved 2 lives tonight. That's not something most 17-year-olds get to say." He didn't smile back. "I missed my interview." Sabrina's smile faded, replaced by something like sorrow. "I'm sorry." Jordan shrugged. "There'll be other chances." But he didn't believe it. Not really. He looked out the window, watching the ambulance vanish into the dawn. A deep breath rattled in his chest. The pilot's voice came through again. "We'll remain grounded for the next 30 minutes for emergency protocols and paperwork. Thank you for your cooperation." Jordan leaned his head against the cool window pane. The adrenaline was fading. Now came the crash of reality. He had given up his one shot, and yet... He had done the only thing that made sense. Above him, the intercom clicked off. All he could hear now was the slowing beat of his heart, the buzz of the engines, and, somewhere in the distance, sirens wailing toward a city just waking up. The morning light hadn't quite broken yet, but Jordan Ellis had already lived a lifetime in the span of 30 minutes. And even though no one clapped, no one cheered, and no medal would ever be handed to him, he had changed the course of 3 lives, and perhaps, unknowingly, his own. The sky over Lisbon was still bathed in a pre-dawn haze. The horizon a muted canvas of deep purples and soft gray blues. Outside the terminal, the ambulance's red lights blinked like a heartbeat against the empty tarmac as Claire Hawthorne was carefully loaded onto a stretcher. Her belly rose beneath the blankets, her breaths still shallow, but no longer desperate. Her fingers clung tightly to her husband's as paramedics secured her mask and wheeled her down the jet bridge. Jordan Ellis stood off to the side, quietly, unseen amid the flurry of medical professionals. He didn't move, didn't follow. His part was done now. He could still feel the heat of Claire's palm from when she'd whispered, "Thank you," the sound of Nicholas's hesitant nod echoing louder than any praise. No fanfare followed. No flight crew announcement. Just the closing of the aircraft door behind them. The flight attendants offered him a seat in the galley as the plane was cleaned and prepped. The air was still tense, residual adrenaline clinging to the cabin walls. Jordan sat with a bottle of orange juice untouched in his hand, his fingers tapping lightly against the plastic. His hoodie felt too warm now. His mind, once razor-sharp, was fuzzy with fatigue. He kept thinking about the interview. It was supposed to start in 4 hours, in Zurich. In a polished conference room with fluorescent lights, crisp water bottles, and carefully timed pitches from the world's most gifted teenage minds. He had rehearsed his speech dozens of times in his bedroom back in Atlanta, reciting answers to imagined questions from imaginary doctors. He had even memorized obscure statistics on rural healthcare ratios. But he wasn't in Zurich. He wasn't anywhere near a podium or a panel of judges. He was in Lisbon, with nothing but his backpack, his conviction, and a completely derailed future. Some part of him wanted to cry, but he didn't. He hadn't cried since his father died. Not when the scholarships didn't cover everything. Not when the apartment above theirs caught fire. Not even when Aunt Charlene's knees started failing and he had to carry her up the stairs. No tears, just action. Jordan opened his phone and checked the email again. Young Global Health Scholars, Finalist Interview. 8:00 a.m. Zurich. Time, in person only. Below, in bold, it read, "No remote accommodations permitted unless in cases of international disaster or border closure." Not a single clause that covered saving a stranger's life on an airplane. He sighed, closed the email, and slid the phone into his pocket. He needed to figure out what came next. By the time Jordan made it to the arrivals terminal, the Lisbon morning had broken fully. Yellowed sunlight poured through high glass walls, casting shadows that stretched across glossy tile floors. The airport buzzed gently around him. Travelers wheeled luggage, airport workers rolled carts, and somewhere nearby a baby cried sharply. It was an ordinary scene, wildly indifferent to what had just happened. He found a corner near a vending machine and sank onto the bench beside it. He pulled his notes from his backpack. Still intact, highlighted, dog-eared. He ran a finger over the handwritten diagram he'd drawn, the circulatory system of the lungs. Annotated in red, underlined 3 times, were the words, "Pulmonary embolism. Deadly if missed. Treat immediately." He should have been presenting this to someone in a blazer. Instead, he was staring at it alone, under the flickering buzz of a vending machine light. "Thought I might find you here." Jordan looked up sharply. Nicholas Hawthorne stood a few feet away, the sleeves of his blazer pushed back and his once crisp shirt now wrinkled from a long, sleepless night. In his hand was a to-go cup of coffee. He held it out without a word. Jordan hesitated, then took it. "How's Claire?" he asked. "Resting. Stable," Nicholas said. "The doctors confirmed it. A clot in her left lung. They said the aspirin you gave her likely prevented it from moving deeper." Jordan nodded, jaw tight. "Good. And the baby," Nicholas added, "also stable. Heartbeats back to normal. They'll monitor her closely, but they're hopeful. That's thanks to you." Jordan shrugged. "I didn't do anything special, just did what I knew." "That's more than most would have done." A long pause stretched between them. "I missed my interview," Jordan said softly, as if it only just landed in his chest. Nicholas sat beside him. "I know. Jordan didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the diagram in his lap. It was my shot. Not just at a scholarship, but everything else. Stanford, med school, getting out. Out? Jordan tilted his head slightly. Out of the neighborhood that never had what Claire just got in 10 minutes. My dad would have lived if he had someone like me, or someone like you who even noticed. Nicholas didn't argue. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had designed software to map genetic risk factors in neurological diseases. Hands that had written checks to global relief missions in countries he couldn't pronounce. But hands that had never once asked whether the block 5 miles from his own mansion had a working clinic. "What are you going to do now?" Nicholas asked. Jordan gave a bitter smile. "Fly home, tell my aunt I saved someone, and that it cost me everything." Nicholas frowned. "You think that's all this will be? A loss?" Jordan shrugged. "That's how the system works. No backup plans for kids like me, no second chances." Nicholas ran a hand over his face. He looked older now, more tired than powerful. "I want to help." Jordan stiffened. "I don't want your money." "I wasn't offering money." "Then what?" "Whatever you need to keep going." Jordan met his gaze, unreadable. "You mean like a second interview with a panel who won't even take a phone call? Or a miracle scholarship that overlooks the fact I'm not a legacy kid from prep school?" Nicholas stayed quiet. Jordan leaned forward, his voice lower now. "If you want to help, there's something else." "I'm listening." "My aunt, Charlene. She was an ER nurse for 20 years. Then she got injured, couldn't work anymore. She's got heart failure, COPD, arthritis so bad she can't climb the stairs. Insurance barely covers her inhalers. We've been waiting 4 months for a cardiology consult. She's not the only one. Our building is full of people like her. People who worked their whole lives and now they have to choose between groceries and beta blockers." Nicholas was silent, eyes steady. "There's a clinic 4 blocks away," Jordan continued. "One doctor, 3,000 patients, no transport program, no funding for specialists, no digital records. They're drowning. We're all just waiting to get sick enough to matter." Nicholas finally spoke. "And you think I can fix that?" Jordan didn't flinch. "I think you can start seeing it." Nicholas nodded slowly. "And if I do?" Jordan looked at him, his voice suddenly fierce with something more powerful than anger, truth. "Then you help my aunt, and the dozens like her. Not because you owe me, but because now you know. You know what happens when people don't matter enough to be saved in time." Nicholas stared at him, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the man who had answers. He felt like someone who had missed something for years, something vital. Jordan stood. "You said whatever I need. That's what I need. Not for me, for her." Nicholas looked up at him. "Then that's what you'll get." Jordan blinked. "You're serious?" "As serious as you were when you walked into first class and saved my family." Jordan didn't reply right away. His hands clutched the coffee cup tighter, warmth seeping through his fingers like a promise he wasn't sure he could trust. Then slowly, he gave a small nod. "Okay." They sat in silence after that. No plans. No promises written in ink. Just 2 men, one 17, one nearing 40, bound together by a moment in the sky neither would ever forget. And though neither of them knew what would come next, one thing was clear. Something had already begun. The hotel cafe was nearly empty when Nicholas Hawthorne arrived the next morning. Sunlight spilled in through wide windows, brushing over the polished tables and flickering across half-drunk cappuccinos and abandoned newspapers. A few bleary-eyed travelers chatted softly near the back, but otherwise the space was quiet. Nicholas scanned the room until his gaze landed on the far corner. Jordan Ellis sat alone. A notebook lay open before him, its pages covered in meticulous, color-coded notes. Next to it sat a coffee that had long since gone cold. He wasn't writing, just staring, at the same sentence, unmoved, as if willing the page to understand what he couldn't say aloud. Nicholas walked slowly across the room, unsure if he was more nervous than Claire had been before delivering keynote speeches. This was different. He wasn't meeting an investor. He wasn't pitching a product. He wasn't offering control. He was about to face someone who had, without asking, changed everything. Jordan noticed him only when the chair across from him slid back. He blinked, startled, then sat up straighter, his hand instinctively brushing his notes closed. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," Nicholas echoed, setting his coffee down. His suit jacket was still crumpled from yesterday, but he didn't care. "Claire's doing better. They've got her on anticoagulants now. The doctors say if she rests, she should carry to term." Jordan gave a small nod, not quite meeting his eyes. "I'm glad." "She asked me to talk to you," Nicholas said. Jordan didn't respond. Nicholas cleared his throat. "Look, I don't know how to say thank you for what you did. I don't think there is a way. You didn't just help. You saved her. You saved our daughter." Jordan gave a faint smile. "Wasn't planning on it. Just happened to be in the right seat at the wrong time." "No," Nicholas said, leaning forward. "You were in the right seat because you fought to be there. You studied. You listened. You spoke up when everyone else sat down. That's not luck, Jordan. That's something most people never do." Jordan finally looked at him. "You don't have to say all that." "I'm not saying it because I have to," Nicholas said. "I'm saying it because it's true, and because I'd like to help." Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly. Here it comes, he thought. The offer, the check, the debt dressed as gratitude. I don't want money. "I figured," Nicholas replied, "and I'm not offering that. Not like that." Jordan crossed his arms. "Then what are you offering?" Nicholas hesitated. "Something more lasting, I hope. You said yesterday that your aunt's been waiting months for a cardiologist, that your community's drowning in patients. One clinic, no transport, no staff, no support." Jordan's expression didn't change. "That's not new." "No," Nicholas admitted. "But it's new to me. I've spent the last 15 years funding projects across the globe, mobile hospitals in the Congo, vaccination hubs in Laos, surgical centers in Argentina. But I've never once looked at the places less than 20 miles from where I live." "You donate to the world," Jordan said quietly, "but you forgot to check your own backyard." "Exactly," Nicholas said, surprising both of them with the honesty in his voice. "So, I want to start there now. I want to partner, with people like your aunt, with people like you." Jordan's face stayed guarded, but his fingers curled slightly on the edge of the table. Nicholas continued, "I'm not talking charity. I'm not interested in writing checks and walking away. I want to build something. Clinics, transport programs, real infrastructure. But it has to be led by the people who live there. It has to be trusted, and that won't happen unless it starts with listening." Jordan blinked. "You want to listen now?" "I should have a long time ago," Nicholas said. "I want to now, and if you're willing, I want to hear more about what your community needs." Jordan leaned back, letting that settle. He studied Nicholas with the caution of someone who'd heard promises before and watched them blow away like dust. But there was something different in Nicholas's face. He wasn't trying to fix a headline. He wasn't chasing redemption. He looked present, and present was a start. "I can tell you what it's like," Jordan said finally, "but you're not going to like hearing it." "I don't expect to," Nicholas replied, "but that doesn't mean I shouldn't." Jordan glanced out the window. "There's a pharmacy on Ashby Avenue where my aunt gets her prescriptions. Or tries to. They don't carry half the medications she needs because they're too expensive to stock. If they order them, it takes 2 weeks. Most of the time, she's out for days before they arrive. She uses expired meds and pretends they're still working." Nicholas frowned. "And there's no other option?" "Not if you don't have a car. Not if the buses only run twice a day, and you've got bad joints and no strength to stand in the cold." Jordan's voice tightened. "You think people in our building get lazy? They're tired, man. They're tired of trying and still being left behind." Nicholas didn't interrupt. "There's a guy on the second floor," Jordan continued. "Used to teach chemistry. Can't walk anymore because of untreated diabetes. He hasn't seen a specialist in 3 years. There's a woman downstairs who skips meals so her grandkids can eat. She needs inhalers, but Medicaid takes too long, and no one checks in unless she collapses." "Jesus," Nicholas whispered. "This isn't broken glass," Jordan said. "This is systemic rot. It's apathy built into policy, and it doesn't get fixed with a donation. It gets fixed when people stop pretending it's not there." Nicholas ran a hand down his face. "I don't want to pretend anymore." "Then don't," Jordan said. "Show up. Listen. Put people in charge who've lived it. And maybe, just maybe, you build something that doesn't vanish when the cameras turn off." Nicholas nodded slowly. "What would you call it?" Jordan blinked. "What?" "The initiative. The project. What would you name it?" Jordan paused. He hadn't thought that far, but his mind drifted to the stack of flashcards in his bag. The handwritten notes on pulmonary embolism. The old textbooks Aunt Charlene had pulled from a library sale so he could teach himself diagnostics. The voice of his father, once telling him, "You'll help people, Jordy. You already do." "The Ellis Care Initiative," Jordan said softly. "Not for me. For him. For her." Nicholas smiled. "Ellis Care. That sounds right." They sat quietly for a moment. Outside, the Lisbon streets grew busier, cars rushing past, delivery men stacking crates, a woman laughing into her phone as she sipped espresso at a nearby cafe. The city had moved on, but something between them had stayed suspended, something raw and real. Jordan looked at Nicholas. "This won't be easy." "I don't want easy," Nicholas said. "I want true." A beat passed. Then Jordan offered his hand. Nicholas shook it, and just like that, the partnership began. Not in a boardroom, not at a gala, but across a cafe table littered with cold coffee, crumpled notes, and the invisible weight of a world they both finally chose to see. 1 week later, a sleek black town car turned cautiously onto a cracked road in East Atlanta. The late afternoon sun filtered through skeletal branches, casting shadows onto weathered brick buildings and rusted fire escapes. As the vehicle crept forward, Nicholas Hawthorne sat stiffly in the back seat, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Beside him, Claire rested one hand gently on her growing belly, the other reaching across to squeeze his knee with quiet reassurance. "You're more nervous than when we met my parents," she said with a soft smile. Nicholas exhaled through his nose, not quite smiling. "That woman raised Jordan. I want to make a good impression." The driver pulled up in front of a narrow walk-up with peeling paint and a paper sign taped to the glass front door that read, "Elevator out of order. Again." Nicholas stared at it for a long moment. Claire gently opened her door and stepped out with care. The humid air clung to them immediately, thick with the scent of engine oil, fried food from the corner store, and something older, something tired. At the top of the cracked steps stood Jordan Ellis, waiting with one hand on the railing. He waved them up and offered his other hand to Claire. "Take your time," he said. "No rush. She's made enough food to feed the whole building anyway." Claire grinned, grateful. "Well, I'm eating for 2. Nicholas followed silently, helping steady Claire when she paused halfway to catch her breath. As they reached the final step, a soft but savory smell wafted out from the open door. It was the unmistakable scent of cornbread, stewed greens, and something slow-cooked for hours with love and very little budget. Inside, the apartment was small but spotless. Everything gleamed. Framed family photos lined the walls in mismatched frames. A carefully folded afghan rested over the back of the couch, and on the dining table stood a pitcher of sweet tea, sweating against the warm air. In the center of the living room, sitting upright in a worn but regal armchair with an oxygen tube looped over her ears and a polished cane resting at her side, was Mrs. Charlene Ellis. She wore a bright floral dress and a single strand of pearls. Her silver hair was pinned up neatly, her eyes sharp as scalpels behind thick lenses. She took them in for a beat. Claire, glowing but cautious. Nicholas, polished but clearly uncomfortable. Then she gestured toward the table. "So, these are the airplane people," she said dryly. "Come in. Don't let the heat out." Nicholas straightened, clearing his throat. "Ma'am, Mrs. Ellis, thank you for having us. We brought a few things." He gestured to the gift bag in his hand. "Set it down," she said, waving vaguely toward the kitchen. "Gifts are fine, but I prefer actions." Nicholas placed the bag aside without argument. Claire offered a gentle smile and walked to sit beside the older woman. "Jordan's told us so much about you." Mrs. Ellis lifted an eyebrow. "Has he? Good things, I hope." "Mostly threats," Jordan muttered from the corner. Mrs. Ellis gave a proud snort. "As it should be." Then her gaze sharpened on Nicholas. "So tell me, Mr. Hawthorne, what exactly do you plan to do for this neighborhood? And why should I believe a man who flew in on a plane and thinks bandages fix broken systems?" Claire bit her lip to hide a smile. Nicholas swallowed, his polished pitch evaporating before he could reach for it. "I don't have a perfect answer," he said. "But I'm not here to fix. I'm here to learn and partner. Jordan showed me a world I didn't want to admit existed. He gave me the clearest direction I've ever had, and it wasn't about data or revenue. It was about people." Mrs. Ellis tilted her head, watching him like a hawk eyeing an injured animal. Nicholas continued. "He told me what your community needs, not in vague terms, but in specifics. Transportation, specialists, trust. I've already begun laying the groundwork for a health initiative. Clinics that operate locally, with input from the people who live here. We want to provide transportation for patients who can't drive. Contracts with mobile pharmacies. Telehealth support. And most importantly, we don't want to put a name on a building. We want to put people in those buildings who care." Silence. Mrs. Ellis leaned back slowly, her fingers tapping her cane. Claire reached out gently. "We'd also like to offer you full private care, home visits, access to any specialist you need, not because we feel guilty, but because we're grateful, and because you matter." Mrs. Ellis's eyes didn't soften, but her voice did. "Don't offer it out of guilt. Do it because people like me have worth, even if we never save your life." Nicholas's eyes burned with quiet sincerity. "I know that now." From the kitchen, Jordan returned with plates in both hands. "She made enough greens to drown in," he muttered. "Y'all better be hungry." They sat together at the small table, elbows tucked carefully, passing sweet tea and cornbread. Claire laughed when Jordan tried to explain to Nicholas the correct way to eat collards. Nicholas listened carefully to every detail Mrs. Ellis shared, not just about medicine or health, but about life in this building, the neighbors, the stories. She talked about a woman down the hall who once kept a clinic notebook because she had to track medications for 5 different people. About the time she herself had to treat a neighbor with a broken arm using little more than ice, gauze, and prayer. "People think we're helpless," Mrs. Ellis said, setting down her fork. "But we've been helping ourselves for decades. The problem is no one's ever helped us help ourselves." Nicholas nodded slowly. "That's what we want to change." Later, as dinner wrapped and the sun dipped below the trees, they walked the neighborhood together. Jordan pointed out the clinic that closed on weekends because they couldn't afford weekend staff. He showed them the pharmacy that didn't stock insulin. The gas station where seniors bought microwave dinners because there was no grocery store within walking distance. A bus stop bench with no shelter, no lighting, and no route that ran past 6 p.m. Nicholas said very little during that walk, but he listened. Back at the apartment, just before they left, Mrs. Ellis took Claire's hands in hers. "That baby's going to have a good mama," she said, eyes shining. "And now, maybe, because of her, some other babies will have a chance too." Claire squeezed her hand tightly. Mrs. Ellis turned to Nicholas next. "And you," she said. "You're not as clueless as I thought. Still a bit green, but trying. That counts." Nicholas smiled, genuine, if a little humbled. "Thank you, ma'am." She nodded once, then turned to Jordan. "Walk them down. Make sure they don't get lost." Outside, as they reached the car, Nicholas turned to Jordan. "She's amazing." Jordan smiled faintly. "She's everything." Nicholas hesitated. "I meant what I said. We're going to make this happen. Not just talk. The Oakfield Health Initiative will break ground by spring." Jordan nodded. "I want to be there. All the way through." "We wouldn't do it without you?" Claire paused before stepping into the car. "We've also been thinking about something else." Jordan tilted his head. "Yeah?" She glanced at Nicholas, who gave a nod. Claire smiled. "We want you to meet someone, when the time comes." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Nicholas grinned. "She'll want to meet the person who helped her get here." The town car pulled away slowly, headlights slicing through the dusk. Jordan stood at the curb, watching until it disappeared around the corner. In that moment, on a street he'd known all his life, something felt different. Not because he'd left, but because someone else had finally come to stay. 3 months later, the air in East Atlanta hung thick with the hum of progress. Construction crews had taken over the abandoned lot on the corner of Oakfield and Hastings, a forgotten patch of land long overrun by weeds, broken glass, and the occasional rusted shopping cart. But now, its chain-link fences bore banners with bold white letters that read, "Coming soon, the Oakfield Health Initiative." The image on the poster showed smiling families, a ramp for wheelchairs, and a glass-walled community clinic surrounded by planters of native flowers. Behind the fence, Jordan Ellis stood with a clipboard in hand, reviewing floor plans with a local contractor named Denise. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a hard hat covered in stickers that read things like "Black Women Build" and "Health Care is a Right." She adjusted her sunglasses as she spoke to Jordan, pointing out areas where they could install solar panels to lower utility costs. "You sure about the multi-use space in the back?" she asked. "You could fit another exam room if you cut it." Jordan shook his head. "We keep it. That space is for education programs, support groups, or just breathing room. Somewhere people can talk without lying on paper-covered tables." Denise grinned. "I like how you think, Ellis." He shrugged modestly. "I'm just channeling Mrs. Charlene. She said people don't heal unless they're seen." As the crew resumed work, Jordan stepped back, looking over the lot with quiet pride. He wasn't the face of the initiative. He'd asked Nicholas not to make this about headlines, but he was involved in everything, from the community listening sessions to the staffing strategy. He'd met with the social workers, local nurses, and even the city's zoning board. Slowly, deliberately, this wasn't becoming a Hawthorne Foundation project. It was becoming theirs. At the same time, Jordan's own life had shifted. His email inbox now carried a subject line he'd once feared was lost forever. "Congratulations, Stanford Pre-Med Scholarship Award." Claire had reached out personally, explaining what happened. Someone on the Zurich panel had heard the story through a medical ethics professor. A rescinded seat opened. But, more than that, the foundation Nicholas created insisted on underwriting a full 4-year scholarship. Quietly, no press, no spectacle, just opportunity, clean and simple. Jordan had cried for the first time in years when he opened the letter. Now, he split his time between Stanford's Summer Bridge program and Atlanta, zooming into classes from the apartment while still attending every Saturday planning session for the clinic. He refused to let his roots be overshadowed by his future. One Friday afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast golden slants across the construction site, Claire Hawthorne's SUV pulled up to the curb. Jordan didn't notice her at first. He was too busy helping unload donated paint buckets. But he turned when he heard the soft voice behind him. "Didn't know future doctors carried 5-gallon drums." He spun around, grinning. "Claire?" She stepped out carefully, now visibly in her final trimester. Her skin glowed under the sunlight, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded her soft curls. I figured it was time I saw what you've been building." Jordan rushed to meet her, helping her walk to the shaded bench near the site entrance. "It's still a work in progress," he said. "We've got another 6 weeks till the inside's even close to ready, but the bones are good." Claire looked around slowly, her eyes tracing the framework, the volunteers, the scaffolding, and most of all the way people waved when they saw Jordan, like he wasn't just part of this. He was this. "Does it feel real yet?" she asked. Jordan exhaled, nodding. "Every day, a little more." "Good," Claire said, setting her water bottle down, "because we have something to talk about." Jordan tilted his head. "Everything okay?" She smiled. "Everything's great, but I need you to be honest with me." "I always am." "Do you remember," she said softly, "on the plane, when I asked for help and you didn't hesitate?" He nodded. "Yeah, I remember every second. And later, when Nicholas offered to help you and you didn't ask for a scholarship or a job, but for your aunt, for this neighborhood." Jordan's jaw tightened. "That was the only thing that mattered." Claire's eyes glittered. "That's why we want to name her after someone who understands that." Jordan froze. "Wait, her?" Claire smiled wider. "It's a girl. We've been debating names, trying to find one that means something, that honors where we've been, what we've learned. And both of us, we keep coming back to one name." Jordan's throat caught. "You don't have to, but we want to," she said gently. "We're naming her Ellis Grace Hawthorne. Ellis because she wouldn't be here without you, and Grace because, well, we all need a little of that." Jordan blinked, stunned. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just come meet her when she arrives." Jordan looked down, hands trembling lightly, as if the moment were too big to hold. "She's going to grow up knowing her name means something," Claire added. "That it comes from someone who chose compassion over convenience, someone who stood up when everyone else stayed seated." Before he could respond, a small voice called from the street corner. "Yo, Jay, Miss Connie brought peach cobbler." Jordan turned to see a neighborhood teen waving a Tupperware dish in the air. He grinned and waved back. "Be right there." Then he turned back to Claire. "You sure she won't be mad when she finds out she's named after a stubborn kid who likes anatomy textbooks more than cartoons?" Claire laughed. "She'll be proud, and hopefully just as stubborn." Later that night, Jordan returned to his aunt's apartment. The lights were low, the TV playing a rerun of Jeopardy in the background. Mrs. Ellis sat in her usual chair, wrapped in her knitted shawl, a glass of water on one side and her oxygen machine humming quietly on the other. He sat beside her. "They're naming the baby after us," he said softly. Mrs. Ellis didn't react for a long moment. Then she chuckled. "Took them long enough." Jordan smiled, his eyes damp. "You okay with that?" "She's got her whole life ahead of her," Mrs. Ellis said. "But if that name helps her remember where she came from, who helped bring her into the world, then I'm more than okay with it." She reached for his hand. "But don't get a big head about it. You're still taking out the trash tomorrow." Jordan laughed, wiped his eyes, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Upstairs, the moonlight touched the corners of the room. The air was still, and, for the first time since that plane ride, the future didn't feel like something far away. It felt close. It felt earned. And it was only just beginning. The Oakfield Health Initiative opened on a crisp October morning, its glass doors gleaming beneath the rising sun. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small by design. No press, no podium, no oversized check with a billionaire's signature. Just folding chairs, community volunteers in matching T-shirts, and a scattering of neighbors who had watched the clinic rise from the forgotten soil of a vacant lot that once held nothing but beer bottles and broken promises. Jordan Ellis stood off to the side near the entrance. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a clean, button-down, dark jeans, and a stethoscope slung around his neck, not for show, but because he'd been shadowing the clinic's lead physician since dawn. He wasn't here for photos. He was here to work. He watched as a families lined up to register, a grandmother holding the hand of a young boy in a Spider-Man backpack. A single father wheeling his daughter in with asthma medication that had expired weeks ago. A pregnant woman leaning against her sister's shoulder, all of them with the same guarded hope in their eyes, the cautious look of people who'd been failed before, wondering if this place would be different. Inside, the walls were painted soft blue. The waiting area had wide chairs, filtered light, free coffee, and books donated by local teachers. There were exam rooms with new equipment, not hand-me-downs. There was a mobile caravan outside, its logo hand-drawn by a group of local art students. And near the front desk, there was a bulletin board labeled Community Voices, already filling with notes, photos, and handwritten stories. Jordan stepped inside just as Mrs. Charlene Ellis arrived, wheeled in by a volunteer nurse. "Well," she said, looking around, "it smells like a place where things get done." Jordan chuckled. "That's the disinfectant." Mrs. Ellis gave him a long side-eye. "Don't get cute, I know that smell. But I also see the chairs have armrests, the floors don't squeak, and the receptionist just called someone baby in a good way. So I approve." Jordan leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You helped build this." "Don't put that on me," she said, but her eyes were shimmering. Behind them, Nicholas and Claire arrived, cradling a sleeping infant in Claire's arms. Little Ellis Grace wore a tiny pink beanie, her cheeks round and impossibly soft. Nicholas carried the diaper bag and looked thoroughly exhausted but deeply content. "She's asleep now," Claire whispered, "but she's going to scream the moment we sit down." Mrs. Ellis smiled. "She's got timing. That's good. She'll need it." Nicholas turned to Jordan. "Have a minute to talk?" Jordan nodded, walking with him toward one of the side hallways, away from the gentle crowd. Nicholas stopped near the volunteer room where staffers were sorting boxes of supplies. "I wanted you to know, we're expanding this. Claire and I talked, and we've already started working on a sister clinic in Oakland." Jordan blinked. "Oakland, California? There's a community near Fruitvale that's lost 2 clinics in 5 years. We have a partner there who's interested in adopting the model. Community-led, mobile units, local staff." Jordan crossed his arms, thoughtful. "Are you calling it Ellis Care too?" Nicholas smiled. "Only if you let us." Jordan shrugged. "The name doesn't matter. The work does." Nicholas's expression softened. "It all matters, Jordan. People need to know who gave them back their breath." Just then, a small commotion near the front desk drew their attention. A woman was holding a prescription slip, tears running down her face. "You mean I can get this today?" she asked. "I don't have to wait. I can get it now." The receptionist nodded, already picking up the phone. "Our driver's heading to the partner pharmacy in 10. We'll have it back in under an hour." The woman crumpled slightly, overwhelmed. "I've been waiting 6 months," she whispered. "I stopped hoping." Jordan watched, throat tight. Nicholas placed a hand on his shoulder, and for once, neither of them said anything. Later that day, Jordan sat with Claire and baby Ellis on a bench just outside the clinic's side garden, a patch of earth now filled with marigolds and herbs planted by local school kids. The baby squirmed slightly, letting out a half-coo, half-sigh. "She's going to have questions," Claire said, bouncing her gently. "About her name, about what this place means." Jordan looked at the infant's tiny face and smiled. "I hope she asks. And I hope she's the kind of girl who won't settle for simple answers." Claire laughed softly. "She won't. She already fights diaper changes like it's a civil rights protest." He grinned, then looked out at the clinic, its windows glowing in the golden light of afternoon. He thought about the plane ride that changed everything. About the moment he stood up, unsure if anyone would listen. About the choice to stay, to miss his interview, to speak up anyway. And now, here he was. Not a student chasing credentials, not a kid being polite, but a partner, a builder, a bridge. That evening, the community hosted a small dinner outside the clinic. Folding tables lined the sidewalk, covered in dishes brought from every kitchen in the neighborhood. Fried chicken, baked macaroni, tamales, jollof rice, peach cobbler, plastic cups of lemonade and grape soda. Music played from an old Bluetooth speaker. Laughter spilled into the streets like sunlight. Mrs. Ellis sat at the head of one table, holding court like a queen with her oxygen tank beside her and a plate piled high. "He tried to get me to eat kale," she was telling someone. "Kale." I said, "Boy, if you don't hand me that collard green, I'm disowning you." Everyone roared. Jordan sat across from her, cheeks hurting from how much he was smiling. Nicholas and Claire joined a game of dominoes with some of the volunteers. The baby slept peacefully in a makeshift bassinet lined with a fleece blanket embroidered with the clinic's logo. As the sun set and fairy lights blinked on across the tables, a local pastor stood to say a few words. He was short, balding, and carried himself with the quiet weight of someone who had buried more people than he'd ever wanted to. His voice wasn't booming, but every word landed like an anchor. "Some people," he said, "they change lives with speeches. Some change lives with money. But every so often someone changes lives by simply refusing to look away." He looked at Jordan. This clinic, this moment, this is what happens when one person says, "Not this time." The crowd clapped softly, then louder, the applause rolling like thunder down the street. Jordan looked down, humbled, overwhelmed. Then he stood and nodded once. "No speeches," he said. "Just thank you." After dinner, as the chairs were folded and dishes packed up, Jordan walked through the clinic one last time. The halls were quiet now. The echo of shoes on tile, the faint scent of lavender from the cleaning spray. He paused at the wall outside the break room where a new plaque had been installed. The Oakfield Health Initiative built by the community. For the community. Inspired by courage at 36,000 feet. Jordan reached out and touched the metal, fingertips brushing the engraved letters. It wasn't his name on the plaque, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Because this story, this place, it was never about credit. It was about breath, about dignity, about people who mattered even when no one was looking. And now, everyone was looking. Winter came to Atlanta with a gentler touch than most places. The mornings were cool, the air crisp but forgiving. On the first Saturday of December, frost dusted the clinic's front garden beds, and the windows of the Oakfield Health Initiative glowed from within, soft lights casting warmth into the sleepy neighborhood like a steady pulse. Inside, Jordan Ellis stood in exam room 3, helping a young boy slide off the exam table while his mother zipped up his coat. "You did great, champ," Jordan said with a smile, offering the kid a sticker. "Next time, we'll get you one with dinosaurs." "Promise?" the boy asked, clutching his superhero sticker like gold. "Scout's honor," Jordan replied, even though he'd never actually been a scout. He walked them to the waiting area, said goodbye, then stepped into the staff corridor where the scent of cinnamon rolls from the break room was battling with the sharp tang of antiseptic. It had been 3 months since the clinic opened, and every day still felt like something between a dream and a heartbeat. There had been no grand announcements, no media coverage, but people came. Word traveled in line at the grocery store, on back porches, through church pews and barbershop banter. Mrs. Ellis had become the unofficial voice of the clinic, sitting in her corner chair near the entrance, offering unsolicited advice, sly commentary, and, occasionally, snacks. "I'm not here to work," she often said. "I'm just making sure y'all don't burn the place down." That morning she had arrived earlier than usual, dressed in a pale blue cardigan and her favorite Sunday scarf, the one with tiny stitched violets around the edges. "Got a feeling," she told Jordan, adjusting her oxygen line with practiced fingers. "Something's coming." He had smiled, thinking she meant another long day of patience. But now, standing outside the consultation room near the front of the clinic, Jordan heard a familiar laugh, one he hadn't heard in person since the day the clinic opened. Claire Hawthorne stepped inside, carrying baby Ellis Grace, who was bundled in a fleece onesie with the ears on the hood. She was bigger now, almost 6 months old, her cheeks impossibly round, eyes sharp and curious as ever. Nicholas followed behind them, holding a wrapped box in both hands. Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" Claire grinned. "Christmas came early." Nicholas held out the box. "Go ahead. Open it." Jordan hesitated, wiping his hands on his coat, then carefully peeled back the wrapping paper. Inside the box was a leather-bound binder with gold-embossed letters on the front. Ellis Care Expansion Plan, Phase 2. Jordan blinked, flipping open the cover. Inside were schematics, city permits, community partner agreements, and handwritten notes outlining the launch of 5 new community-led clinics in Oakland, Newark, Tulsa, Birmingham, and Baton Rouge. Every location selected had been chosen for one reason: lack of access and abundance of need. He looked up slowly, breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat. "We've secured the first 2 locations," Nicholas said. "The other 3 are in motion, but we wanted you to see it first." Claire stepped closer, adjusting Ellis Grace on her hip. "Each clinic will have its own community advisory board, its own local name, but the Ellis Care model stays: local hiring, flexible services, medical vans, free primary, and chronic care." Jordan turned a page and saw his own handwriting. Notes he had scribbled months ago on a napkin, now turned into printed policy. "You kept everything," he whispered. "We built everything from it," Nicholas said. Jordan looked at the baby, who had somehow wriggled a mitten free and was now chewing on Claire's scarf. "She doesn't even know," he murmured, "what she already started." "She'll know one day," Claire replied. "But by then, hopefully, there'll be even more to tell." Jordan closed the binder gently and set it on the reception counter. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting golden stripes across the tile. "I don't know how to—" "Don't," Nicholas interrupted. "You don't owe us anything. This is your legacy, too." Just then, a voice called from the door. "Jordan?" He turned. A girl about his age stood at the entrance, flanked by a younger sibling and a grandmother who leaned heavily on a cane. Her backpack was worn, her hoodie too light for the weather, and her expression uncertain. "They said I could talk to someone about a free consultation." Jordan stepped forward without hesitation. "Of course. Come on in." He led them toward exam room 4, holding the door as they passed. Claire watched him go, smiling. Nicholas slid an arm around her waist. "He's going to change everything." "He already has," she said softly. Later that night, after the last patient left and the doors were locked, Jordan sat alone in the staff room, flipping through the binder again. He stopped at the final page, which held no charts, no blueprints, just a single letter, handwritten in Claire's neat, looping script. "Jordan, we don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stood up that day. Maybe Claire would have survived. Maybe not. But the truth is, you didn't wait to find out. You acted. And because you did, my family is still whole. But more than that, you didn't stop with us. You saw a crack in the world and decided not to walk past it. You didn't just help build a clinic. You built something that's reshaping how we see care, community, and responsibility. Ellis Care isn't about a name. It's about choosing to see people as worth saving. Thank you for that. For everything. Nicholas. Jordan read it twice. Then he folded it and tucked it into the back of the binder. He walked out into the quiet clinic lobby, past the receptionist's desk, past the soft humming machines, and out onto the front steps where Mrs. Ellis still sat beneath a space heater, bundled in blankets, sipping tea. She looked at him without turning her head. "I told you something was coming." "You always know," he said, sitting beside her. The night air was cool and still. In the distance, a siren passed. Someone played music from a window down the block, an old soul song drifting on the breeze. Jordan leaned back and closed his eyes. It had all started at 36,000 feet, with one voice, with a question no one else answered. And it had become this, a ripple turned into a wave, a choice that wouldn't stop moving forward. As Mrs. Ellis leaned against his shoulder and Ellis Grace slept soundly back at home, the street outside the clinic quieted into stillness. But something inside Jordan stirred. Not an ending, just the next beginning. In the quiet echoes of Jordan Ellis's journey, From a teenager in economy class to the heart behind a national health initiative, we're reminded of a simple but powerful truth. Heroism doesn't require a title, a degree, or permission. It only requires the courage to stand up when it matters most. This story teaches us that compassion, when paired with action, can ripple far beyond the moment. Jordan didn't just save one life, he chose to challenge an entire system. He didn't chase recognition or reward. He demanded dignity, not for himself, but for those overlooked, unheard, and underserved. In doing so, he transformed not only his future, but the futures of thousands. We often wait for someone else to fix what's broken, but Jordan reminds us that change begins the moment we stop waiting and start seeing. The moment we speak up. Act. Care. It's not always comfortable. It's rarely easy. But when one person chooses purpose over prestige, service over silence, they light a path others can follow. So, if you ever wonder whether your voice matters, whether your choice to care makes a difference, remember Jordan. Remember that courage is contagious, and that sometimes the most powerful movements begin with a single breath. We'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories that inspire real change. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in Stories That Matter.